We have three handbooks. One is front desk, one is physical therapy, and one is medical. We went from 2 clinics to 4 clinics in the span of about 6 months. The acquisition part was easy because we just acquired physical therapy clinics that were fairly profitable, and we just switched our tax ID to it and added medical services. In concept, it's easy, but in practice, it's very hard because you have people who are highly trained, who are paid a lot of money, and they have to now communicate with each other. And so you're adding this dimension to a clinic that they've never had before. And so we had to have some language that was an easy process to follow, like a cookbook.
Kick it.
Welcome to Strata Stories. My name is Thomas Schreiber. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Strata PT. Strata PT is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. On today's episode, Paul Singh, the CEO of Strata PT, talks with Colin Rigney, a PT and the business partner at Modern Physical Therapy and Sports Medicine in Arizona. Paul and Colin talk through teaching business skills and healthcare curriculums, the need for comprehensive and forward-thinking healthcare education, the importance of documenting processes and scaling a business, and lastly, clear communication and standardized protocols for effective operations. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo. Now, without further delay, here's today's episode.
I see you're listed as an adjunct faculty, and I thought it was interesting to maybe talk about this because you have been out of school for a little while. No offense intended, of course. And I'm curious, like, knowing what you know in the industry now, like, what do you wish was somehow baked into the curriculum way back then? Maybe things that would have saved you a lot of headache and maybe sped up your career and your earnings faster. So let me leave it there. What do you think?
Yeah, curriculums need to teach better how the game is played when it comes to healthcare, especially when you're working for the third-party payer. I don't know if it was you or somebody else who had a post recently that was talking about you got to know who your customer is, and if your customer is primarily whoever's paying you is that third-party payer, that insurance carrier. Frankly, that's your customer. I mean, yeah, you're treating the patient. The patient has a contract with that insurance company, but the rules you're playing by are the rules that they're setting.
Right.
And the rules change all the time. And generally it's not made to be in your favor as the clinician. So there's this, it's a little bit of Pollyanna baked into curriculums where, yes, it has to be unbiased. I totally understand that. There has to be technical skills bred, trained, and baked in to the point where the person has to come out ready to safely treat things that come their way that they're going to see day one. My role in the institution is I teach radiology and imaging. And my background, that's my niche specialty. My specialty is musculoskeletal ultrasound diagnostics. I have worked as a physician extender pretty much my whole career and spun that role into a business model, and that's how our clinics were. That's how our specialty clinics came about. The idea and how we scaled it was using that skill. And so I'm bringing that specialty into the curriculum. And I try not to stay, I try to, play the greatest hits in terms of, they got to come out with these skills. They got to know what's going to come on the board exam with respect to imaging. But I like to sprinkle in just a little bit of knowledge or just insight to what to expect. You're going to come out of school. You're going to be a commodity. How many of you have thought about going into business? Do you even know what that means? Are you just going to go and work for somebody else and help build their asset, or what's have you thought about? Basically, I'm just trying to figure thought. Like what's your thought? And I generally start there day one. Most people respond pretty well to it. Some people you can tell that they've never been asked that question in their career or thought about it. And that's, to me, it's a little bit troublesome. You got this far and you just gone through the system. Schools are created by business owners, designed to create employees to go work for other business owners, and that's that's it. There's nothing, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but you got to know that's the game you're playing, and there's a game within the game in healthcare, and that's why this all this burnout is in the field, because we talked about this, that you can't build a business model solely around something that's paying you less every year, and hence you have to find a way to mitigate what that, what the detrimental rules that are coming your way. So it's a balance, right? And
Yeah.
you're as an instructor, I can't be too biased. I have to generate thought that's going to benefit them without influencing the wrong direction either way. But I do like to sprinkle that in. Most of the time is well received, but I also do encourage students to come out and do seek a specialty, because it does make you more valuable, and you don't know where that specialty will take you. If you get really, 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 really good at something, you're surprised what kind of doors I didn't know. I just got to be so ruthlessly good at what I do that a lot of doors opened up that I never would have thought 5-10 years ago would have. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I do enjoy it. It's only about 3 months a year. I teach one course, one semester, and we do take student rotation. So it's also it's also a platform to try to breed new talent, have them come in and do a long rotation with us, and show them how our model in healthcare is a little bit different. We're offering something that nobody else in the community really is, and the potential to work in a model like ours, it's definitely different than wherever else you'd find. Yeah. So.
The good news is I don't think we're far off on this, actually. And I think I mentioned this to you in the previous show. I've never been a PT, never been in any training of it. I'm not from healthcare, but I think that, so a couple months ago, I ended up I was speaking down at Texas Tech, which actually has a large PT program. And the long and short of it is that my comments to those people, to those students, I think is generally in line with yours. And the blunt way I said it was like, hey, if you're sitting in this room and you're thinking that your DPT piece of paper is going to magically catapult you into like the realms of MTV Cribs or whatever, then I got bad news for you. And then I went on to just say, like, look, I think that at the very least, while you're here at school, you might as well just consider the idea of maybe minoring in business, or minoring in marketing, or minoring in computer science. Not necessarily because those minors are going to magically also propel you to the front, but because they're going to like influence a slightly different part of your brain that needs to kind of also develop. Like I'm a big believer that entrepreneurial thinking is hard to teach, but I think it's so learnable. And so, I, that being said, though, I don't know about you, but I know for me, I'm 43 now. And when I look back at who I was, when I was 19 years old, I don't, I don't know that I was actually thinking about, 20 years from now. And I also certainly wasn't thinking about like, career skills and standing out. I was probably thinking more like, okay, Thursday night, which party, and what's the minimum passing grade to get through this computer science or electrical engineering class. But I hope that, I think there's some interesting points to this though, too, because like and let me say this assertively. I'm curious for you, like, you've probably hired people before. I'm curious if you would agree or disagree with me on this. I think that as a hiring manager, I really do value people that can at least show some sort of like intellectual curiosity outside their domain expertise. And I have no way to prove what I'm about to say, but I think I've found that, as it relates to being a hiring manager, if you've got, let's just say, two candidates that look the same on paper, let's just for the sake of discussion, they have the same maybe degree, same, everything. The one that actually displays some sort of intellectual curiosity, and I'm not talking like extracurriculars, like, oh, they were on the soccer team. I'm talking like maybe they took a minor in something, maybe they have a side hustle on TikTok, helping people, fix their resumes. Those kind of things I find to be very fascinating because it sort of is an outward display of maybe their ambition, their curiosity. And those are all the things that I want inside any business I'm running.
Yep.
So you're agreeing already.
I agree 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't do the hiring anymore. Thank God. But when I was having those interviews, when I was conducting them, I would always ask. I would always try to and do it. It's just I'm genuinely curious. I want to know, like, what are people's, have they thought about their 2, 5, 7 year goals? Doesn't have to be with us, but personally, what are you, have you thought that far ahead? And yeah, going back to your I like to go and reach people when I'm instructing. Like, I'm hoping I'll be able to like talk to somebody and help them understand like where I was at then, and help them. And just, if I can just say one thing that'll make them think a little bit differently. I like, in some ways, I wish I had somebody at that stage talking to me like this. And even if it's just one person. But back to the hiring thing. Yeah, we had a guy who, he's like, yeah, I'm doing this thing on the side with this movement program. And basically, I'm doing home exercise videos, like in short form for patients. And there's this platform I'm working on, blah, blah, blah. Is that going to get in the way? I'm like, that's exactly what we're looking for. That's what I'm looking for in terms of somebody who is thinking about growth, because leadership and entrepreneurship isn't something you can teach. It's not taught, it's caught. And so, if somebody has that flicker in them, and you put them in an environment where they're going to have access to it, they'll have a place to flourish and feel free to expand that skill set. Like for us, we've attracted a few people with our program, our internal training program, where we train diagnostic ultrasound, and they sign a work agreement. But it's an extensive program that they're going to come out board certified, ready to grow their skills, and you really can't get that anywhere else. And so we attract a lot of top talent with it. We've attracted people who failed in their own business, and it's a place where they can come and still, have their own clinic and run it like a director, and have incentives, and you give them that structure, and maybe even flavor something when we do move towards a bigger market event, that they have some skin in the game. And generally, I'm looking for somebody who maybe doesn't like want to take it all on, but has has the ability to grow into something, and champion it, on a small scale, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I think as a society, we've sort of um, implicitly defined entrepreneurship as starting something. And I think one of the subtle but really important points that I try to get across to students on topics like this is that it's not so important to think about whether you start something or not. That could be part of the conversation, but on the whole, entrepreneurship is really more about how you think about something. So it is just as possible to be an entrepreneur in a cubicle at a Fortune 500. Maybe not by the classical definition. The classic definition, I suppose, publicly is like you started something and you're going to go on Shark Tank. But in the broader context, you can be an entrepreneur inside of a cubicle at a Fortune 500, and that is just as valuable, just as important, and frankly, in some ways, has just as much as the same upside as somebody that starts a company. And so that's probably one of the harder to explain ideas to people. The other thing is, I'm curious if this triggers anything for you. I was this is probably like 7 or 8 years ago. I want to say I was in Iowa. I might have been I want to say Iowa. I was speaking at a small university up there. And it was, I think, to the computer science and entrepreneurship programs had come together to kind of like listen to me talk. God knows why, but anyway, here we are.
Yeah.
And so I started out with this like trick question, and so if you can imagine it, I'm in like the student center, and there must have been like 300-400 kids there, ranging from freshmen to seniors at this university. And so anyway, I flashed this slide up on the screen, and it was a screenshot of the United Airlines homepage. And so remember, these are computer science people and entrepreneurs or whatever, or entrepreneurship program, students, whatever. And so I was like, okay, pop quiz. Let's start this off on, real hot. This airline, you know who they are. This is the screenshot of their website as of this morning. Tell me how you would optimize this. And here's where the trick question came in. And everybody's a little nervous. Where I'm like, no, we're not moving past this slide until somebody tells me something. Okay, then the first sheepish hands come up, and somebody's like, well, I would change, I hate that color of the button, and I think that search feature should be above the fold. They were starting to, you could tell that now the juices are starting to flow, right? And so I got to let them go. And I probably like picked on 8 or 9 kids to finally get them to say stuff. And I was like, look, the lesson here is you're all wrong. And over the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to explain why. But the true answer here is that the first question you should have answered my question with a question, which is, what are we trying to optimize for? And that's how entrepreneurial thinking displays itself, because if the goal is to increase conversion rate to get more ticket sales, that is fundamentally a different path than, hey, we're just trying to get more accounts created versus, hey, we're just trying to get people to do more search. And what I then tried to use this to then alluded to it, and then I explained it in my conversation to these entrepreneurs and computer scientists, was like, whether you understand this or not, the skills you're going to learn in your entrepreneurship classes and your CS classes are kind of like the fundamentals. But what you're really going to have to really learn is how to apply them on top of concepts like human psychology, business goals, things like that. And so anyway, it was, I still get emails from people about it. And actually, you know what? I'm looking in my office right now. Sorry, I have to show you this. I don't know if Thomas, I don't know if this is going to make it into the show. They printed out a board of this, and you can't really see it because my shot's too tight or whatever. But the point is like anyway, Thomas, I'm sorry I screwed up the recording here, but it is funny because the students actually printed this out and then sent it back. Somebody mailed it to me a couple of weeks later. And I was like, I guess I used very colorful language. And I was like, well, anyway. So, all right. But the point is, though, is that I think, this is interesting to me because for example, I was talking to somebody else on our show a couple of weeks ago, Justin Stiver, and he talked to me about sort of how he tries to show more and more of his employees some of the numbers. And I'm paraphrasing here, but like the way I was like, man, that seems like a lot of work, explaining your budgets, explaining your P&L. That seems like a lot of work. And he said it in a much more coherent way, but I would summarize what he said by like, I would summarize it this way. He said, look, for the vast majority of his employees, those numbers are a way to kind of tie their performance to the broader goal and help us coach them, manage them. Now it's not about feelings like, oh, Justin wants me to do this because he's the boss and I'm just an employee. He was saying like, in the worst case, the majority of these people now know their work is tied to some number and I can coach them better or whatever. And then he went on to say, but then for the small subset of people that might have some sort of ambition or entrepreneurial goals or something, even if they can't articulate it, showing them these numbers also sparks that interest and maybe sparks that curiosity to say like, okay, here's how they might come up with an idea. Like, here's how I might help you move that number in the right direction. And so, anyway, this conversation may not be the sexiest conversation in PT right now, but I do think personally, it's probably one of the more important ones as we think about, this next generation that's coming out of school every year. I don't know if again, please feel free to disagree with me here. I still think most practice owners are sort of like, so I'm 43. I think most practice owners are like, that are my age or maybe slightly older, they view these lower, like they'll say things like, oh man, these kids come out of school, don't even want to work hard or whatever. And, that's like that age old generational battle. Everybody thinks the younger generation is naive and the older generation's boring. And the point is though, is that like, it's kind of all the same. Like the only constant is that it's kind of all the same. Like, they all want more for themselves. The way that they work is different. And like, I'll admit, like if I see somebody on TikTok, I'm like, I don't get it. But I have to remind myself with my entrepreneurial brain that like, just because I don't get it does not negate the fact that like billions of people sit on that platform every day. And some small percentage of those billion of eyeballs probably is one of my customers. And so it opens this question of like, what do we do about it? Do we actually like support one of the other guests on our show, Rafi? He's got a clinic down in Atlanta, and he talked about this idea about how he carves out a specific amount of time on everybody's calendar. I think in his world, I think it's an hour a week or maybe 2 hours a week for content creation. Like they're on the clock. And then he built his entire business model around being able to support that capability. So anyway, I think, okay, so here's maybe a naive question for you, because I've never been on the faculty side or even adjunct faculty side of any university. And you can take a pass on this if it's going to get you in trouble, but why do you think, given your time in these in the university setting, just in the broader context, and for anybody listening, we're not talking about the place where you teach right now, just in the broader scheme of things, why haven't curriculums for PT and OT and all that stuff, why haven't curriculums sort of kept up? Like, why is it, the boogeyman is probably not some like cabal of secret people in the shadows trying to like create, but is it because like the dollar, like, is it because private companies like us aren't doing enough to do stuff? Is it administration not being up to date? What do you think it is? Or what do you think the fundamental reason is?
I guess I don't have a great answer. I think we can go, there's a few different factors. Number one, I do think things are changing.
Yeah.
I think the one positive thing I'll say is, I've had carte blanche to teach the course the way I want. Nobody's ever asked me a single question about any of my content. I designed it from ground zero. I've done it for as many years as I have. It's been wonderful. I've been able to teach the way I want without any fear of retribution or outside influence. So to me, that's a win. Okay, even if I'm just doing a small part, we're not going to fix the whole system, but if you can just get a few more people like that to come in and just give a little bit of flavor here, all of a sudden you change the dynamics. Now there are some programs now that have really streamlined the system. I think taking this program to 3 years is overkill. The administrative costs are massive for these universities. It's no secret. And I've been on record about, let's talk about collusion. Okay. Institutions can charge what they want because they know the federal government is going to back every loan. No private banks back these loans. They're way too toxic. Why is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Why? I mean, seriously. Yeah. And so I keep going to this, and I know I'm not alone, but I just think that nobody really likes to talk about it, because there is a money train here that the institutions have an incentive to keep butts in seats, just like hotels have to keep rooms full, just like hospitals need beds filled. And there are some changes starting to happen. I know one program here in the state has taken the program from less in-person, almost all virtual, with the exception of like small blocks of hands-on time, and they're graduating people in 2 years. I think that's awesome. That, to me, that's change. Now, is it going to happen on a large scale? Probably not all at once, but I think it has the potential to happen over time. And again, I'm we can go back and listen to this, but I don't think anything I said there's controversial. It's really just fact based and a lot of observation. But Paul, I do think that little things are starting to happen. And as a whole, though, in school, I mean, university as a whole hasn't really evolved that much over a period of time since the first industrial revolution, right?
Yeah,
The
right.
40-hour
Yeah.
work week, it and I do think some things are changing in that regard. But with respect to physical therapy school, the small things are starting to happen, and I do think overall it's trending to be positive. Now, sometimes it's never enough for some people, and that's fine. Um, I'm happy to see that there's enough groundswell in conversation around, like, hey, time out, let's take a look at this. There's some ways to be more efficient here, and some institutions are starting to implement practical solutions for it.
Well, I think this is, well, I appreciate you willing to be willing to talk about that. I'll say this, and if it sparks something, we'll talk about it. And if not, maybe somebody listening will email me and tell me I'm crazy, and that's totally cool too. And then we can move on to the other topic. But, at this, so I kind of mentioned earlier, I spoke down at Texas Tech, and one of the things I said at that one point was, look, the American university system, one of the things they're very, very good at in this country is the concept of technology transfer. So, and just for anybody listening that doesn't know what that means, like, a lot of large universities in this country have large legal teams internally. And what they do is, like, as part of the research that happens at that university, anytime something new is discovered, whether it's a new microchip design or a new like patent is discovered or filed for a business process, I'm making this up, right? You have this, what they call a technology transfer office, that then patents it, because if it was formed as research at that university, they want to own a piece. And, the point is, though, is that they then monetize that. Somebody goes eventually and tries to then use that technology in private business or public business or whatever. Well, lo and behold, there's a fee going back to, whoever holds the patent, in this case, the universities. So the comment I made to the faculty at Texas Tech, or one of the comments I made, was like, the American university system is very good at this. If you go look at the public records or the filings of American universities, pick them: Harvard, Northwestern, Texas Tech, Stanford, pick any university you want and go look at the public filings. You'll see that they get millions of dollars a year, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars, for technology transfer. A good, by the way, cliche example is like the University of Maryland. People probably are not familiar with that university, but if I said to you Google, you're like, oh, I know Google. Well, Google's PageRank algorithm was developed at the University of Maryland by the two founders of Google before Google even existed. Well, where do you think a little small, tiny sliver for a multi-billion-dollar company goes every year up to this day? Is to the University of Maryland. So anyway, now that I've said all that out, the point I made to the faculty was like, look, all you guys and gals are smarter than me. You know how to play the academics game in business, and I get that. But like, if you've gotten this good at patenting and monetizing ideas, what about starting to think about the fact that somewhere in these dorm rooms of 30,000 kids here in town, some subset of them are working on a business? And like, what if you could help them not only continue to get that off the ground, but get a piece of that over the next 5, 6, 10, 20 years or whatever? And of course, the wheels of academics move very slow. So for me as an entrepreneur, nothing is fast enough. That talk was probably 3 months ago. So like, by my definition, like, nothing's happened, but maybe something does. So anyway, this is neither here nor there, but even if I'm curious if anybody listening has any ideas, just, email me or make fun of me on social and we'll talk about it. But let's switch gears then. So in our most recent episode with you, and we'll put that in the show notes here, one of the things you talked about was your work, that in your line of work, and I'm paraphrasing here because I want to let you explain it. You had mentioned that you had helped the practice you're at grow from 1 to 4 clinics really fast. Like, we're talking in a matter of a couple months. And in that previous episode, we talked a little bit at the surface about what that took. And you talked about funding and, documenting processes and stuff like that. And I wanted to obviously don't share anything you can't share that's private, but like, let me set this up. Somewhere out there right now, somebody is listening to this podcast. They're in one clinic and they're trying to figure out how to get to two. So let's just, to the extent that you can, I'd love to talk about specifics. So when you think about documenting processes to get to the next stage, okay, I just opened a Google Doc. It's empty. What should I be documenting? Is it check-in process? Like when you were going through this, like what, anyway, so let me leave it there. Let's unpack that. What does documenting processes to scale actually look like?
We have 3 handbooks. One is front desk, one is physical therapy, and one is medical. So we went from 2 clinics to 4 clinics in the span of about 6 months. And really what made it, the acquisition part was easy because we just acquired physical therapy clinics that were fairly profitable. And we just switched our tax ID to it and added medical services. That's it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
In concept, it's easy, but in practice, it's very hard because then you have people who are highly trained, who are paid a lot of money, and they have to now communicate with each other. And so you're adding this dimension to a clinic that they've never had before. And so we had to have some language that was an easy process to follow, like a cookbook. And this is where, I don't know if you've ever heard or read the book called Who Not How. Are you familiar with that book? Okay.
No.
So for us, it was developing 3 handbooks. Okay. Like I talked about. The front desk book, I really didn't have a huge role in developing that, other than just some input here and there, because we have somebody who is very good at what she does, and she did most of the training. We also have a corporate trainer who knows the system inside and out, EMR, as part of. So when you have a front desk, now you who is used to scheduling physical therapy appointments only, now we're adding the medical side, plus we have imaging. Okay. Yep. And so all of that comes with instructions needed to process now. And so when a new patient comes in or calls, okay, the script has to change a little bit, not a bit, but it has to change. They have to know that, number one, this is not an appointment. This is an experience that we're going to offer you. Now by choosing us to help solve your problem, we are going to do our best to not have to send you anywhere else to get your problem figured out, and help you avoid unnecessary imaging costs and a referral to the specialist. And there's a script. Everything has a script, and I'm not going to pretend to know this. I know the therapy side in and out, okay, because that was what I trained, and I trained the medical side. But everybody has a script. So the front desk has a script, and they have an appointment script to follow, as well as how we run our authorizations for medical and imaging. Physical therapists have a script to follow. So when a patient comes in, okay, patients fit into 3 buckets. There's 3 buckets that they come in. About 10% or less are going to go referred to a specialist. Most of the time, it's actually 5% or less. About 20% of the time, a patient comes in and they're going to require only physical therapy services. Only. Okay. And about 70% of the time, a patient comes in, they're gonna come in with a problem that we've identified that's going to need a combination of services, including medical and physical therapy. So knowing that, okay, and knowing how to refer when and why, okay, now the therapist saying, okay, based on this problem, I'm going to recommend, you have an appointment to see our medical provider who specializes in this issue. Based on my imaging, based on your exam, okay, it's really kind of leading me down the pathway of this. And I feel like it's really important to put you in front of this person, okay, blah, blah, blah. And then that appointment gets made. The front desk says, okay, PT is recommending a medical treatment. They're going to go on the medical schedule. Do we need any other imaging? No. Okay, boom. And that's where knowing your numbers. So the clinic director, um, we know what each case makes basically when it's just physical therapy. And I think we talked last time where we know our PT basically pays the bills, the medical makes the margin. And the medical service line, the beautiful part about it is, most of that's cash. Okay. And following evidence-based practice algorithms, yeah, they're running that drill. But back to your original question, how do so it comes it,
And you defined it, I think, really succinctly, which I think maybe we just touch on that real quick. You said it was front desk. There were three buckets. Can you just talk about those real quick again? What were the three buckets? Front desk.
yeah, three protocol manuals: front desk, physical therapy, and medical.
Okay. And then so like then by the way, I find this fascinating. Like what we do, for example, we're not a healthcare practice, right? But on the technology side, we've got SOP, standard operating procedures, or some people call them desk docs, and we define it as like it's so interesting to me, by the way. Like when I tell people, like, okay, hey, I need you to write down what you do, their immediate reaction is like, oh my God, he's about to fire me. and especially like with the newest, like freshest out of school that I might be managing or whatever, like, okay, write that down. And they're like, oh God, he's about to let me go. And I have to spend a lot of time being like, no. The goal here is for you to write down what you do, because if you're sick tomorrow or you take leave for a week next week, which I want to support, I got to have some way to do what you do at the level you do it at. And so this is a compliment because I like the level you're at. And then on the other side, I say, like, look, if we as a company do this right, there's probably 10 people doing what you're doing right now. And I also like the level you're at. And I'd really love it if there was a baseline that shows these other 9 people how to do what you do. And, but so front desk, it's really fascinating how you done it. Front desk, physical therapy and medical. And just out of curiosity, just because, like, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm like most people where my perception of how hard something is probably 99% of the reason why I didn't do it. So like having done what you're talking about right now, I know that this is as simple as just opening a blank Google Doc and just starting to write down what I do. Like, to me, like, it's not big and scary. It's not going to be perfect on day one. It's actually never going to be done. It's going to be a living document that you revisit every 90 days, maybe. But looking back at how you started this, what was version 1 for you? Was it a Word doc, a yellow legal pad? Like, what was the first day that you started documenting this stuff? What was the stack? What did it look like?
Yeah, it was a Microsoft cloud-based Word doc, basically, that we had everybody. We did literally what you said. Okay, physical therapy, write down what you do.
Check-in process, or
exactly,
write the eval process or whatever.
What does call 1, 2, and 3 look like? What does a lead gen look like for the front desk? Okay, now you convert the lead. What's the scheduling process? Write it all down. Physical therapy, day 1. What's a day 1 look like? You got to write it down from when the patient walks into the door to when they come in the room to the classification of disease or dysfunction that you've identified. There's a process for every single thing.
Yeah.
Medical, same thing. A diagnosis comes your way. This type of tendinopathy, we know we're going to recommend PRP. And there's, what imaging did you use to identify it? What was your clinical exam? It's all written down. Yeah.
This is so, and this will, we can touch on this in a different episode, but I would just say, like, I think okay, so most people, especially practice owners, don't value this at all. So here's what I'm going to say to get their attention, and let me see if you disagree with me. Your practice is worth nothing to any other buyer unless they can do what you do at the same level or better. And the number one way to convey that is to actually have these documents in place.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll go even further to say that, if you do get acquired, you're going to have to write this stuff down, and you're probably going to get a crap deal for it because they realize that you didn't do it and now you're worth nothing until you write this down. But if you do have it, you're able to run the business better. So anyway, you're nodding and stuff like that. So I would just say the summary of this advice to most practice owners is that, like, counterintuitively, the things you have to do to run your practice better are also the things that will make your practice way more valuable if you choose to sell it someday.
Yeah. Do you have something that somebody else can step into and do as good or better than you without
Right.
you being there?
Right.
That's all it comes down
Right.
to.
I love this, man. I love it. What, so, and now just if you can remember this. So when you started this thing, you've described this in your practice so easily. You're like, yeah, well, okay, there's a front desk book, PT book, and a medical book. But like, if we were time traveling back to when you're working on this, did it start out that way, or was it actually one word doc, just got longer and longer, and eventually you were like, huh, that's the PT side. That's way different than the medical side. Then you started to separate out. So did you start out as 3, or what did it look like?
No, we started out. There's four partners. 2 of us were actively working in the clinics as the directors, running them as physical therapists, and we had a medical provider at each office, and then we had 1 kind of front desk coordinator and 2 front desk people. It was really easy to do because we had an owner at each location running the system, and we actually didn't have anything really written down. We just met every morning. Each office met every morning and ran drill with how the day was going to go, and it was very much a hands-on operation. After about 6 months of that, we realized that, oh gosh, like if like one of us needs to step away, or one of us did step away, it didn't quite go the same. And that's when we started to write stuff down. And that evolved, Paul. Probably we didn't, it sounds really bad, but we didn't really have anything coherent that was communicating between the desk and the disciplines for about the first 8 months. But after that, it came together pretty quick as we realized it and saw the need, and we saw the need, number 1, just for us if we wanted to grow, and number 2, that the community needed to trust us, and we needed to establish that trust with somebody coming in the door. Like if somebody called in sick or something happened, there had to have been some kind of line of communication or drill to run that that there was nobody was going to skip a beat with it. So, and we noticed that actually the biggest deficit wasn't in the clinical providers, it was the front office.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strata Stories. Strata PT is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.